there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia review. And today we're diving into the first episode of the second arc of the season, where we see Deku, Bakugou and Todoroki begin their internship in Endeavour's agency, whilst also getting some significant updates on Hawk's mission as a double agent with the League of Villains. And that's some pretty spicy stuff, but before we get into all of that, I just want to let you guys know I have read the manga and I'm aware of any relevant future plot points and details. But for the purpose of these reviews, I only like to talk about what the anime's presented up to now and not go back and forth between the manga and the anime. It just helps to keep the review streamlined and allows anime-only fans to watch along and join in too. But with that being said, let's get started. We start off the episode shortly after the attack on Endeavour and Hawks by the high-end Nomu, following Hawks flying high above a city as he talks to Darby on the phone. Darby describes the events of that day as unfortunate, to which Hawks agrees, saying that if he'd known in advance, he would have dealt with it more efficiently. Although, to me, it definitely feels like Darby didn't say anything on purpose and wanted to see what he was going to do. He probably wanted to see if he was actually going to join up with their cause. And since Hawks basically gave Endeavour the win by using his feathers to send him into the sky for his prominence burn, I'm thinking Darby has his doubts about Hawks' loyalty. This belief of mine's further compounded by the fact that Darby then tells Hawks that he won't be able to trace the call, suggesting he's at least somewhat aware it's likely he's reporting back to somebody. Trying to get back in his good books, Hawks tells him that he's a firm believer in the cause, and that because he's a hero and knows what the system's like, he agrees that it should be done away with. He then thinks about how Darby can't cast him away and that he's been playing the role of an idiot, so that Darby will fall into a false sense of security and start to weigh the reward more heavily than the risk. And it's actually pretty interesting, this dynamic. They're both aware the other one knows they have ulterior motives, but they're willing to work together and use each other to a certain point. I mean, it almost definitely leads to a good old-fashioned throwdown in the future, but for now I'm liking the backroom dealing shenanigans that are going on. Darby then tells him that he's getting one last chance to prove himself and to make his target somebody other than the number one hero. Because obviously, Darby wants to kill him himself, leading off his initial confrontation with Endeavour earlier in the season. We then cut to the Hero Commission office where Hawks is informing them of how Darby's still wary of him, that their interactions are being watched, and that he's going to pinpoint the Nomu's location as soon as he can. And in all likelihood, Darby's probably having a similar conversation about Hawks to his superiors as well. And then we transition scenes once again to Best Jeanist's apartment, where Jeanist is surprised that Hawks has come to visit him. And this seems ominous to me, especially considering we know he goes missing, and now Darby's orders to Hawks. Jeanist then says he's recovering well from All For One's attack on him, and that humans can live without a lung. And I mean, yeah, they can, but it'd be nice not to have to do that. And surely it would make it next to impossible to actually be a hero with one lung. Jeanist then tells Hawks he plans to return soon because there are those that need him to reform them, obviously hinting at Bakugou. And then Hawks thinks that's just too bad as he brandishes a feather sword and the scene cuts away. And that's pretty dark. Obviously Hawks has to commit to his role for the villains to believe him, but you'd think if he was offering another hero on a silver platter, that he'd at least choose someone that's not significantly injured like Best Jeanist, or at least give them a heads up to his plan. Anyway, we shift once again to Hawks flying through the sky, worried because he can't get a hold of Darby, whilst he holds an ominous looking duffel bag. Body bag, maybe? Guess we'll have to wait and see. He then thinks about how there's no news of the League of Villains being sighted before complaining about this happening to him on the last day of the year. So yeah, we've time skipped a bit now to catch up at the end of last episode. It's clear that we're going to get some more information on what Hawks is up to, but it's still pretty clouded in mystery, so we're probably not going to get a satisfying ending on everything Hawks is up to for a fair while, I'd say. And then, after the intro, we find ourselves at Midoriya's apartment on New Year's Eve, with students having been allowed to return home for a single day. Yikes, that's pretty intense. They can just never see their families, only for one day. Boarding schools normally let kids go home for weeks at a time, don't they? I understand the trader thing and worrying about the students' safety is serious, but you can't just take full custody without batting an eye. Can you? We then see Deku telling his mum about the Black Whip incident as they ring in the new year, only to find her frothing at the mouth with how much danger he's been in. Seriously, she's had so many scares about Deku's health over the past year. How much more can her heart take? And I can't imagine it's going to get better for him in the next couple arcs. Yeesh. We then see Deku tell his mum about his letter from Eri, telling him how she liked his singing and dancing at the culture festival, and thanking him for making the toffee apple. Causing Inko to unleash the Midoriya's secret power? Super crying, flooding their house and causing Deku to panic for the family downstairs. And this is hilarious. Normally you'd think that these moments are exaggerated, but the fact that it's canon that they literally flood rooms with their tears makes all these scenes the more funny. She then explains to him that she was always worried for him because he always looked up to All Might and tried to be a hero and came back with bruises and scars because he wasn't very strong, and that made her think she had to protect him from everything. But now that she can see his face after becoming a hero, she realizes she doesn't need to worry, which causes the two of them to cry so hard they shatter the window and flood the street below. And yeah, Quirkless my ass. Considering every time this happens it actually gets addressed by dialogue, it's more than just a gag at this point. Super Tears is his quirk. I'll not hear anything otherwise. Cryman could have been the greatest hero of all time. Oh well. We then move on to what I guess is the next day, where she sees him off for his work study at Endeavour's agency. And it's nice that they've pretty much repaired their relationship. It's not like they ever had a bad relationship, but I guess it was a little strained by all the recent incidents that Deku found himself facing. And it's really heartwarming to see his mum fully accept the path he's chosen and want him to succeed and make the most of it with no regrets. Then we get another look at what Hawks has been up to as he approaches the building. As he lands, he calls out that he's returned, only to be confronted by pro-hero Slide and Go, who was introduced earlier when he cleaned up after Bakugou and Todoroki's battle with the low-level water villain. And I believe I said at that time, he seems like a nice man. Well, whoopsie. Guess I'll just never trust again. Anyway, he goes on to try and intimidate Hawks and tell him that even though he may be the number 2 hero, he can't just fly off to get coffee whenever he likes. And whilst Hawks keeps up his idiot facade and plays along, giving him an intense salute, another voice calls out telling him he didn't hear anything of the sort, and that because Hawks can get them a lot of info they'd never otherwise get, Slide and Go does not outrank him, and is much less useful. The voice then explains that they have countless micro-recording devices installed in Hawks that monitor his activity, using Hawks' coffee run as an example, with the voice knowing that Hawks had almost bought black coffee by mistake, and panicked because he prefers sweet coffee. So yeah, this guy's obviously somebody important and high-ranking within whatever organisation this is, but like I've said previously, we'll probably learn about these people slowly, and they'll remain mysterious as long as possible to make the show feel tense and kind of like a detective drama. The scene then moves on to find Shoto, Deku and Bakugou getting off a train to be met by Endeavour, who warmly welcomes them with a smile, before slipping into a scowl and telling them he doesn't actually feel happy, wishes Shoto came alone, and that he only took them on because Shoto asked him to. And honestly, if you're trying to reconnect with your mostly estranged son, maybe try being nice to his friends. Idiot. Luckily though, Bakugou doesn't play nice with anybody and tells Endeavour that he's cringy, which makes Endeavour go on a rant to Shoto about how he needs to pick his friends more carefully. We then have a little flashback of All Might hearing about how Deku and Bakugou are considering going to Endeavour's to do their work study, with All Might being excited for the three of them to get that opportunity, especially since Midoriya's training is going so well. All Might then tells Bakugou that he should be especially vigilant when training, and that he should watch Endeavour, who's quite similar to him in terms of personality and drive, and therefore seeing how he's changed would be a good experience for Bakugou. And honestly, I liked All Might's growth here. Gone are the days of Deku being his sole priority, and he's definitely trying his hardest to also help Bakugou grow as much as he can. True dad might. And then we go back to Endeavour, where Deku's being a bit of a suck-up and telling him about how they're thankful to be there and will do their best to learn from the number 1 hero, which causes Endeavour to remember Deku's words to him at the sports festival, that Shoto isn't him. And how does he repay the debt he owes this kid? By running off yelling how he's only going to train Shoto and the other 2 can watch from the back. What a nice man. We then cut away to see a nutcase of a villain whose power seems to be able to manipulate glass, screaming about how the end times are upon them and that he's received divine messages from the universe. And yeah, this guy seems like he's basically the equivalent of those end times religious nuts that go on killing sprees. I mean, he looks really unhinged, so if this wasn't an intro episode, I'd expect an interesting fight. But since Endeavour's out to show off in front of his son and his friends, this dude is toast. Double toast, since when we pan out we see Hawks looking at him from a distance too. Ominously, the villain, who randoms in an office building called the Servant of the Stars, starts talking about how the land is about to be enveloped in darkness and that he'll purge the source of this darkness. He then absorbs glass from the windows of the buildings into a giant sphere, holding it above him before Endeavour appears and destroys it with a flashfire fist. Sensing he's about to get smacked around, the old dude flies through an alleyway where his goons try to jump Endeavour, but Deku and the boys intervene. Except their KO attacks are spoiled by Hawks, who decides to make his appearance and take him out with his feathers. And of course, as this is going on, Endeavour subdues the old man. As they cart him off to the police station, he starts ranting about how the light Endeavour gives off brings darkness and death with it. And yeah, this seems like it's even more foreshadowing for Endeavour's downfall. They're really just laying it on thick the past couple of episodes, and honestly, it's making me more and more hyped up for it. Hawks then approaches Endeavour and the boys, and after a brief exchange of small talk, asks Endeavour if he's read the book Meta Liberation War, telling him that it's gotten very popular recently as it makes a number of accurate predictions about the current day. Namely that if certain individuals are given freedom and others are not, it's the ones that don't have that freedom that face the consequences of it. So I guess this now ties into heroes being able to use their quirks whenever they want, whereas normal people can't. Thus, they get targeted by villains because they can't fight back. And honestly, the book does have a point. He then tells Endeavour that he's highlighted some sections for him to read, mentally apologising for being cryptic as he knows that the mysterious guy from earlier is watching his every move. Deku, completely missing the point at all, decides that he should read the book as well, to see if it explains Hawks' secret to being so fast. And did you even check what the title was, Deku? It clearly is not going to explain that. Regardless, an excited Hawks passes out the books to the surprised interns before taking his leave, telling them all to work hard and to read the highlighted sections. And I guess to the villains watching, this would come across as Hawks attempting to indoctrinate more heroes, particularly up-and-comers. But it's also a bit of a double-edged sword and a bit risky, as they could also just assume Hawks is attempting to warn them of what's to come. But then again, if they picked up on that just by meeting Hawks this one time and not knowing his true personality, I'd have to call BS. But even though the villains won't get it, I'm guessing that at the very least, we're going to see Endeavour unravel this very soon, if not immediately. And that the highlighted sections will be some sort of code for him to crack to understand what's going on. It would be really frustrating if he doesn't pick up on it, as is the trope in many stories, but I doubt that would actually be the case. We then move on to Endeavour's agency, where the trio are greeted by the Flamin' sidekicks and quickly pawned off onto them, being informed that they're going to be doing the majority of their work with them, but since there are over 30 of them, they'll need to earn their place, and thus beat the pros at their own game. However, they're told that for now, they're going to stay put and wait for Endeavour's instructions, prompting a patented Bakugou rant. We then get a glimpse inside Endeavour's office, where he's troubled by Hawks' behaviour, thinking that he's acting completely different to when they met up and were attacked by the Nomu, saying things that directly contradict what he'd previously told Endeavour about his beliefs, and acting randomly serious at times when before he acted like everything he said was a joke. He then thinks about how Hawks told him to read the highlighted sections, particularly the second part, and realises that he meant the second word from each section, and begins to crack the code. And I liked this little sequence, as I feel like Endeavour's always shown to be a musclehead kind of dude, but really he's super cunning and intelligent. There's a reason only All Might could keep him out of the top spot. He's a true all-rounder. We then cut to Hawks, who thinks about how he gave that same code to the Hero Commission, but that he doesn't expect Endeavour will be able to crack it. And it kind of shows that the world at large probably also just thinks of him as a total meathead. But really, to be so willing to try and breed the perfect quirk child, you have to have some sort of cunning. He might not be a nice guy, but he is smart, and he knows how things work. Hawks then thinks about how there are a number of heroes working with the organisation and wishes he could have actually told Endeavour as opposed to just hoping he could read his facial expressions. We then head back to Endeavour, who's reading the book in the most intense way possible, flipping through it at ridiculous speed, uncovering the words, "The enemy is the Liberation Army, and they number over 100,000. That is a lot of villains to fight. Yikes. And that in 4 months, they rise to action. So 4 months, that looks like it's going to be happening pretty soon in terms of arcs. Maybe 1 or 2 until this big clash. And then that brings us to the end of the episode, and I really enjoyed it. It had action, jokes, and most importantly, plot. Loved it, and I really enjoyed all the intrigue and the suspense. This arc should be fun. And I really enjoyed that we finally got a big tease to an upcoming all-out war with heroes and villains. It's only up from here. That being said, those are just my thoughts, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.